So good evening and welcome. My name is Cory Schneider, and I am so very excited to be with you. As Archives Chair for Women's League, my goal was not only to tell Women's League's story, but to also help you tell yours. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we will be recording the session. So if you don't want to be seen, please turn off your video. Excuse me. Everyone is muted to avoid unwanted background noise. We are also disabling the chat during the presentation, but we'll turn it back on at the end so you can put your questions in the chat box. And of course, you can contact me anytime. I have put my information in the chat box. The plan for this evening is to tell you about my sharing my stories journey, in the hopes it might stimulate you to do something to share yours. I will also present some lessons learned, tips, and techniques to help you get started, followed by some time to take your questions. Before we begin, I would like to give a special welcome to Debbie Goldich, and Debbie would like to, Women's League International President. Debbie, you're muted.
I know, it takes a little while. It takes a little while. Thank you, Cory. Much of what I was going to say, you already said. So thank you very much for saying that we are recorded. And if you don't want to be recorded, turn your camera off. This will be available later on the website, on the front page, not on the members only portal. I want to recognize Ellen Bresnick and Julia Loeb as education chairs. This comes under the education portfolio, and I love to say that Women's League is alive and well. We're providing lots of educational opportunities for engagement and learning, and this is one of them, and we thank Cory for tonight. Thank you, Cory.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Also, I was planning to welcome Ellen and Julia. Thank you for coming. And also to give a very special thanks to Karen Bellina, who is the Women's League Member Relations Manager, for her wonderful tech support. And also to Carol Simon, who will be helping to coordinate the questions at the end of the session. So, of all the gifts that grandparents can give their grandchildren, there we go. Of all the gifts that grandparents can give their grandchildren, few are grander than a sense of where they fit into the history of their family. In fact, family storytelling is more than just a wonderful bonding custom. It has a proven basis in scientific fact. Researchers at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, found that children who know a lot about their families have higher self-esteem than those who only know a little. In addition, those children aware of family history are more likely to feel more in control of their own lives. To know who you are is to know from where you have come. So, how did I get started on this journey? My mother was the youngest of 6 and had little knowledge of her family history. When her older siblings shared a letter of information, she would be excited about the contents and often would share them with me. I don't think her family story is particularly unique, but the significance to me was that it was part of my story. Over the years, I helped Mom sort photos into albums. I marveled at the stories she did know, although they were never written down, and I have forgotten most of them. For Mother's Day one year, I created a collage that you see on the slide of my mom's family and wrote the names of the people in the pictures on the front so we would always know who they were. And for special milestone celebrations over the years, I would construct a rudimentary family tree and a display of pictures. When Mom died in 2007, I was the recipient of any letters and materials she had, which amounted to a file about 3/4 of an inch thick, as well as the pictures. Not much. It did start with a question. Our son David knew that among Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews, there is a custom to name a child after someone, usually a family member who died. And in Sephardic custom, it may also be after someone who is living. The usual explanation for this practice is that parents hope that in receiving the name of an admired family member, the child will emulate in life the virtues of the namesake. To a certain extent, too, it is believed that the soul of the loved one's lives live on in the child who now bears his or her name. A dozen years ago, as David was about to be married, he asked the question, who are these people I am named after? And you would like our children to be named after? And the answer led to Cory's journey. To this point, my journey was done by feel and instinct and intent and heart, and not research. Yet, Women's League makes each of us stretch and grow. So I researched for this session the proper way to share your family's stories and found it amazingly similar to what I did, but with lots more info and ideas. When it comes to family stories and archives, there's lots of help, to learn, and lots of information available. And it's all through Google or Bing or whatever search engine you use. As I share my journey with you tonight, I have also included some of the information and organization recommended by the experts that I gathered through my research. The key areas to consider as you prepare your family history, your story, are purpose, collection and research, organization, preservation, dissemination, and continuation. Let's look at each of these separately. Purpose. The purposes identify your goals, your focus, and what kind of accessibility you want. What are your end goals? My original goal was to answer my son's question, very simply. My focus. I was not so interested in genealogy and DNA and all of those new places you can go to get that information. What I wanted to do, and this was originally, before I got involved in the whole process, was to answer the question, who our ancestors were as people. What are the traits that they had that our children and grandchildren were named for? And accessibility. So I worked out, we went to collection and research. What do you want? What materials do you want? How are you going to get it? And from whom? Well, I had my mom's material and my previous efforts, some family trees and some scanned photos. And at this point, I just have to thank my daughter-in-law, Lisa. My son, for our 40th wedding anniversary, I have 3 sons, were gifting us with a newfangled thing, an electronic digital thing that was so current and so new, a digital family photo. Maybe some of you have had them and know what I'm talking about. So in preparation for that gift, my daughter-in-law, Lisa, took my photo albums and scanned almost 1,000 pictures. And from those pictures, she constructed a family tree for her family and for ours. So I had that family tree, and I had her scanned photos. But here's what I wanted more of. I wanted more stories. Stories that brought our ancestors to life, that told us who they were as people, what their characters were. I wanted more pictures. And I wanted pictures or the actual memorabilia, the heirlooms, and the memories that they provoked and they brought to life. So I sent requests to family members. Unfortunately, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents were long gone, and my aunts and uncles were too. And those that were still living were not able to communicate the family history. So I only had cousins and siblings and my own children and grandchildren to ask. Very slowly, the information came in, and still the information comes in. Once your family recognizes that you are self-proclaimed family archivists, they're pretty happy to share memories because they know that you will share with them the memories that you receive. The next is organization. It's a jumble. You have a big collection that needs to be organized. You can organize it, suggestions the research say, by person, by date, by family, by topic, by type, or prioritize which one you want to go first, and then underneath it, you can organize the rest. So what did I do for my organization? I decided that I was going to do a printed book. And in the beginning, I wanted the book to include a list of immediate family, their Hebrew names and who they are named after, the ancestors' stories with a few pictures, and family trees. And for the family trees, I used a program called GenoPro, and I'll talk about that in a minute. What were the results? Well, here's the Schneider Friedman family book, created with love for our children, grandchildren, and their descendants. It's not fancy, and in fact, I made a decision to use, instead of printing it and binding it, I wanted to use a loose leaf, just a 3-ring binder, so that it can be added to, because that was one of my goals. I didn't want it to be a dead book. I wanted to be a book that was living and would continue to record the history of our family. The table of contents included a preface, Hebrew names, cemetery plots, storage updating and collateral information, our ancestors, family trees, and family heirlooms. The preface was my message, how the book came to be and its purpose. It was from my guts, what I wanted people to see and what I wanted them to know about this journey that that resulted in this book. Hebrew names, and you can see our oldest son, Stephen, that's his name. Shimon Yisrael ben Shmuel Yosef Rachel. Shimon, and you can't see it here, but Shimon was after Stan's dad, and Yisrael was after my grandfather, my paternal grandfather. And what's just a funny anecdote, my grandfather had died while I was pregnant with Stephen. He was to be the first great grandchild. And when he did find out that I was pregnant. And when Stephen was born, my grandmother, for all the years that she was living and enjoyed Stephen as her first great grandchild, never called him Stephen. She always called him S. Israel in anything she wrote to him and in anything she said, because she was so excited and so pleased that he was named after her beloved husband. I put in cemetery plots. I took pictures and they're on internet. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted it to assist future researchers because cemetery plots seem to be a real good place to if somebody is doing genealogy. And I also wanted them to know where the cemetery plots were of the people for whom they were named, because maybe they would want to visit those plots and have a discussion with them. The next was storage, a document on storage updating collateral information. The storage was, where are you going to find further information? The updating was really a mandate to them because they're the ones who need to update the information. And the collateral information, it listed what it was and how to find it. The next section was our ancestors. And they included the ancestors for which our children and grandchildren have been named. And that was the original thought. And you see here, the format of the page was a picture of the ancestor, and that happens to be my mother's mother. Information about her or the person, so that people, the person reading it could get a sense for who they were and what they were like and their traits and what their life was like. And at the beginning of it, you see the namesake, David Paul Schneider, that's that David that we talked about that started this whole process, was named after my mom's mom. And then just a few pictures. And of course, they're all labeled. So as I started the book and I started writing about the ancestors, I was telling Stan's sister, Betty, about the book. And she said, I want to be in that book. Why can't I be in that book? And I looked at her and I said, Betty, you're not dead yet. She said, but I want to be in the book. Unfortunately, not so long after, Betty did die. And even though there is no one named after her, I decided that she had a right and she wanted to be in the book. So I put her in the book as well. And while I was putting Betty in, I decided to put Stan and I in the book because there's no, Stan, my husband, because there's no person who can more biasedly tell a story about my life than me and Stan's. Anyway, that was the section on our ancestors. The next section were family trees. And I did the individual, next slide, please. I did the individual family trees, my mother's family, my father's family, both of his ancestors, you know, his mother's family, his father's family. There were, and you can see from this, there were 8 separate families. There's about 14 family trees in the book. And I was showing them to my youngest son, Scott, and he said, Mom, these trees are great, except I'm not clear how I come. Where do I come from? And so under his wish and persuasion, I ended up making this the first family tree, which was an overall family tree of direct descendants. So my children and grandchildren can see exactly where they come from. Then they can, if they want to know who the cousins and second cousins and third cousins are and who the aunts and great aunts and whatever, they can look in the individual family trees. And that really was a great way of doing it. And of course, you see at the bottom, my 3 sons and their families. So the next were family heirlooms. What are family heirlooms? Well, they're definitely not based on value. Family members are not going to understand or even value the importance of a family heirloom if the story is missing. You know that kiddish cup that you have in your break front or you have in a sacred place, someplace in your home, and it's kind of beaten up? And it's your pride and joy because you know that your great-grandfather, maybe at great peril, as an example, brought it over from Europe or wherever they came from and gave it to your mother or your grandmother who gave it to your parent and gave it to you. And this is one of your most precious possessions. So let's go 50, 60, 70 years ahead. And your great grandson or your great great granddaughter has gotten that cup. And you know what? She's cleaning out the house and she's reorganizing things and she sees this battered cup. She knows that it was given, but she doesn't know what the meaning is, what the story is. And she says, you know what? It's not very pretty. It's all broken. It's all dented. You know what? It's sterling. I'll sell it for the sterling, for the silver. And so it's done. If she knew the story, she would never in a million years get rid of that cup. So family heirlooms retain their value only when the story is there. And I've shown 3 family heirlooms that we have in our family with their stories. There's different ways to tell and leave the stories. You can do it by video or audio, written or printed. You can attach cards to the item without hurting the item and have the story on the card. What I chose to do was to take pictures of each item and put the story on a document so that my kids, my grandkids and their kids and their grandkids would happen to know the story. So it's important. The stories go from one sentence to several paragraphs. The next area was collateral information. And it is never ending. It's the most surprising category of everything that happened from when I started this whole journey. So what did I have in that area? Certificates. I have some birth and marriage and citizenship certificates. I have only 2 ketubot, my own ketubah and my grandparents from 1914, my father's parents, that I only got a picture of because my uncle took a picture of it and sent it to everyone. And I have to tell you, I have to confess that my ketubah was in a file in my filing cabinet until I was preparing for this program tonight, and I knew that I had to take it out of that filing cabinet, take a picture, and put it into the collateral information. And I'll talk later about where that's stored. I also took our engagement or Tenoyum contract and did the same thing. There are letters. Most of what I learned about my mother's parents, who they were from letters from her siblings and her cousins about them and about her family. Various articles, obituaries, newspaper clippings, and I have a wonderful article about my father's brother who was honored by Downstate Medical Center, which tells us about his professional life. I also have a published book of poetry written by my aunt, my mother's oldest sibling, when she was 98. And I recently got a scanned copy of my mother's father's diary, and you see a picture of it there, from 1947. It's scanned. I don't have the actual diary. I don't even know where the actual diary is. I haven't tried to discern the handwriting yet, but I'm looking forward to unlocking some of the secrets of who he was and his day-to-day life. Event invites and information. I not only have my parents' wedding invitation, but the menu card from the reception. And of course, the menu was brisket and kasha varnishkas and knishes. This was 1941 when they got married. Genealogical information. Family trees from members of the family, most of them passed, when my mother received them, and thank goodness she saved them. Videos. Want to watch the movie from my wedding? Or one of my sons read Torah at a dress rehearsal of his bar mitzvah? I had taken all the videos and transferred them from film or VCR tapes to CDs. And then I used a program called Movie Maker to upload them to the internet. Pictures, Lots and lots of pictures. Started first from my daughter-in-law, Lisa, and now numbers about 4,000. Each picture's title indicates the year and the people in the picture. And when there's a large group, I have created a companion document with the names of each person, row by row. And stories. They are the best. And they are being added to all the time. I've gotten from my cousins and from my siblings and from my children about my parents and Stan's mother. When I hear a story or tell a story, before I forget, I write it down and upload it to where I'm storing the collateral information. And interviews. There are some transcripts of interviews done, and one in particular by my son, David. You remember David, of course. He started this whole project. For a 4th grade project, he was to interview a family member and get their story. He interviewed Stan's mom, and I saved it, you know, like you save your kids' projects and papers sometimes. Well, I saved that. And I want to tell you that the information that he got from Stan's mom was really very responsible for a lot of what we have from Stan's family's history. It even included the name of the ship that she came on from Europe, which resulted in a ship's manifest when he and his grandmother told him the name of the ship in that interview. We were able to get a copy of that manifest, and it's very cool. And it's really interesting because it not only is just a ship's manifest with her name on it, but it shows who else she came with from the family and what relationship they were. And then recipes. Recipes with stories. So many recipes, favorite ones, family ones. Some are typed and some are pictures of the recipe cards in the giver's handwriting. And each recipe has a bit of a story of where it came from and any memories about it. It's interesting now that my older grandchildren have their own homes. No weddings or great grandchildren yet, though. They call me for a recipe and I tell them to look on thebox.com where I have them stored for it, just to get them used to the habit. Collateral information is an ongoing challenge. Adding stories and information continually. So happy that I added more in preparation for tonight. It reminded me of the stories that I hadn't written. The next unit is on preservation, something that I have not yet really worked on. But understand from the research that I did for this program how important it is. Some tips, and there's lots of information on the internet about this. Use archival materials. If you can, use archival quality materials to store and record your family's history. Do not laminate your documents or photos. Instead, store your original documents and make duplicates to show family members and friends. Upgrade files and formats of electronic media. Electronic media is a great way to save space. Be prepared to upgrade the files and formats to keep the media usable. Just a short story I was using for my photographs. I was using a program called Windows Live Photo Gallery, which gave, and you could with that identify every person in the picture. And so I did, except that when I got my new computer, Windows Live Photo Gallery is no longer being given. It's gone. It's an old program and it's not being downloaded anymore or used anymore. So what I had to do then is I had to take, as I told you, I took each picture, and in the name, the title of the picture, the year, and then the people in the picture. When you scan or record, be sure to use archival standards in terms of file size, format, and storage media. It's very confusing, and it's something that I will be learning more about, and I hope you will join in with me to learn more about. For storage location, avoid areas, simple guidelines. Avoid areas such as attics, basements, and outbuildings like a garage. Put your memorabilia in the center of your home. Consider keeping your most precious heirlooms in a fireproof safe or box. And duplicate. Accidents and natural disasters happen. Give copies of the final products of your family history projects and of your most precious heirlooms to multiple family members. So if you lose, you won't lose them all. And you may also consider donating to an institution, your family archives. Dissemination. You want to identify in what form: electronically, internet storage, or printed. Electronically, a thumb drive, a CD, or on the internet. And if you go onto the internet, you've got several places. You've got Google Docs, Google Sheets, those kinds of storage. You've got Dropbox.com, and Dropbox.com is 2 gigabytes free. Plus, if you refer friends, you can get up to 16 additional gigabytes. Box.com gives you 10 gigabytes free, but no refer a friend program. Ubuntu One gives you 5 gigabytes free plus a refer program with up to 20 gigabytes. It's a lot of storage. And the reason I emphasize the free part of it is because how do you pay for electronic storage when you're not here? There's no lifetime payment plans available. No way to pay for it in years to come. So what's my plan? What did I decide to do? Well, I printed books, as I had told you, and I've printed 14 copies of the book. One for Stan and I, one for each of our 3 sons, and we're very blessed, one for each of our 10 grandchildren. I used Box.com for the immediate family. And the immediate family's Box.com has information that the wider family, my cousins, my siblings, are really not that interested in. They don't need to have David or Stephen or Scott chanting their bar mitzvah, a video of that, or seeing the reception from my wedding. So that stuff is on Box.com. And then for the wider family, I use Dropbox, which gives you 2 gigabytes free, and plus you can get the refer a friend extra for it. And that's for my cousins and my siblings, and that works. If I run out of space, then I do a second Dropbox or a second Box.com using a different email address. So I might have schneiderarchives@gmail.com or whatever, and I might have Friedman, my maiden name, archives@gmail.com. For more space.
No, it's a shorthand for symptoms.
You can't do that, Stan. So, sorry about that. And you get the free, for each email address, you get the free box or the Dropbox. And here's a big hint. If you save documents as a PDF, especially those Word documents, for instance, have pictures like my ancestors' pages, it takes up much less space, except it can't be modified. You save it as a PDF, and you can modify PDFs if you pay for a monthly service to do so, but I don't. So save your documents with pictures that you are not going to modify as PDFs. Continuation, and that's the last part. Adding to the material, asking for and adding new stories, pictures, and heirlooms. And again, as a result of preparing for this session, I sent out emails, and I do this maybe once a year, once every other year. I send out emails to the wider family, and I say, this is all I've been adding. I've been updating our family archives. Please take a look, and I give them how they can access it, and ask them for more materials. And I just today got a picture of my mother's sister, my aunt's beautiful break front filled with very, very old crystal glasses that had been given to her grandson. It's pretty exciting. That was just today. Plan for technology. Assign a family archivist. And what I've done is I've asked my oldest grandchild, Jacob, to be the family archivist and to make sure he's really good with computers, as most of our grandchildren are. And I've asked him to please make sure that he updates the electronic media that we have. Get the word out. As I said, make sure that the family knows that you've got this information and how to access it easily. That was one of my big goals, to access it easily. And that's what I do in that yearly or bi-yearly email to my family, the wider family. I told you it's really hard to pay for electronic storage because you can't do it in perpetuity. So all of this stuff, why'd I do it? And I want to share with you the joys that have come to me because of this journey that I've been on. Every time that I wrote about an ancestor, it was like being on a visit with them, with my grandfather, my mother, my father, Stan's brother. It was just an amazing experience because I could really, it was like just all those memories flooding in and like a visit with them, like I was having a cup of coffee with them for a day. It was very, very joyful and very, very special. I couldn't do more than maybe one ancestor a week because I just wanted to enjoy the feeling of being with them. It gave me a connection to my wider family, asking them for information and thanking them when they sent it and reminding them that things are available. It's very special. It renewed many memories that I had forgotten, memories that I've now written down. I was able to share who I am because who I am is so much of where and who I come from. And I love telling my stories because they showed what's important to me. And I love sharing about my possessions, again, because they're valuable to me and helps my kids and my grandkids and hopefully future generations to understand what values I held. Hearing and writing down the stories of others for the same reason gave me great joy and gave them great joy. I mean, it was a sharing experience. Discovering the collateral information, what a surprise that was. I have to tell you that my cousin, who is moving from New Jersey to Texas, called me and said, I have something I'd like to give you, because she knew I'm the family, kind of the self-designated family archivist. And she brought over a book called a Studio Handbook. I didn't know what a Studio Handbook was. My father's father, my grandfather, was a frustrated artist. And he just couldn't really develop his artistic abilities because he had 5 children and a lot of mouths to feed, a family to support. But what he did do was he made very fancy signs in his dry goods store in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which was not a great place then when they lived there. So he had bought in 1935 what is called the Studio Handbook, which had 250 different fonts that he could copy with layouts and designs. And my cousin brought it over. It's a first edition, and she brought it over and gave it to me. It's so wonderful to get those kinds of things. Discovering the collateral information was just fabulous. And the sharing with my family, with my kids. I love the stories that my children and grandchildren who knew my parents have told about them. It helps me to feel really good about who they were and how we can influence future generations. And I love the information I never knew. There is so much helpful material available on the internet to help you create and share your family history. And there are probably hundreds of ways to do it. Should you be interested in starting or continuing your own journey, please be in touch. I will be happy to share any resources I have discovered. And if there is interest, to facilitate a periodic Zoom where we can share our ideas and challenges. In the meantime, here are some questions to ask yourself as you decide whether to expend time and effort on sharing your history. How important do you think it is to share your family history with your future generations? Why is it important? What ways have you or will you use to share your family history? And when will you start? Don't forget, for help, I'm there. And Ellen Bresnick, our education co-chair, who is a master at writing memoirs and family stories, has also volunteered to help you. So, what's next? You're going to be receiving, everybody who's registered, whether they've been here tonight or not, will be receive a short, it's not a monkey survey, but it's a Google survey, Google Forms survey. And as a follow-up questionnaire. And what we want to know is, what do you want? If you would like, and it's part of the survey, we will send you a tips and resources handout with useful information and links to some helpful articles. Really good stuff that I've discovered as I've researched for this evening. And tentatively scheduled on April 20th at 7:30, we're going to have a Sharing Family Stories Zoom group. Bring your ideas, a place to bring your ideas and share your progress and ask your questions. It is an incredible journey to live forever through your stories, one that benefits you as the storyteller and collector. It is also a priceless gift to your family and future generations. The gift of better knowing who they are because they understand where they come from. Enjoy. Carol Simon, thank you, Carol, is going to be getting your questions from the chat box, which is now open. Or you can raise your hand if she's able to see you. And when you ask a question, please don't forget to unmute. So, any questions before, that you would like to verbalize before people start putting them in the chat box? No questions? We have one, I see. It says, what do you do about email if you stop using that address? You can keep an email address forever. So what I've done is I've really created email addresses for the not mine, but email addresses for the Dropbox and the Box.com. For instance, the Dropbox, I started with Schneider Archives. But really the Dropbox was not just Schneider, it was Friedman, Ortman, Schneider, Chesner, the four families. And so what I did was I just created an email, Schneider, Friedman, Ortman, family @gmail.com, and then change the name, the email on that particular Dropbox. And I have also a Schneider Archives email. So it's not my personal email that I'm using, but emails last forever unless you delete them.
Cory, there's one from Faye. You mentioned using GenPro software for creating family trees. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, GenoPro is a very easy to use software. It's free. And it took me a very short time to learn how to navigate it. I actually learned about it because my daughter-in-law, when she did the family tree from the photos, had this GenoPro family tree, and I've broken it up into the individual family trees. And I'll be happy to give anybody a tutorial on it if they would like. I just got a new computer. It's still available. I've downloaded it to the new computer. So it's genopro.com. I have a friend who's very into genealogy and has a very sophisticated program, but I don't know how people are going to be able to access it.
Okay.
Another question.
Yeah, from Pat Dano. Pat, if you want to unmute yourself, because she had recording personal and family history. You can order a book published by the Sisterhood, a Congregation Bethel of Montgomery County. So Pam, can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is Pat. I'm here. I put the information in the chat. Our sisterhood wrote and had published this book several years ago. It's nowhere near as comprehensive as what Cory has described, but it's a place to get started. And each book is designed to record the memories and the family history of one person. So if it's a couple, you'd need to get 2 books. But it's from a Jewish perspective. We looked for books and we found a lot of them that had a no religious or a Christian perspective. Talk about Christmas, talk about Easter. This is Jewish. It asks for Hebrew names, it asks for yard sites, things like that. And it's a place to get started. You can go on the website and you can see sample pages and a story of how it came about. And it's only $15. It's certainly not going to do the job that Cory is doing for her family, but it's a place to really begin to get this important information down. Some of it is the vitals, Hebrew names, who you're named after, but some of it is favorites. What's my favorite food? What do I like to do in my spare time? You know, some of it is whimsical and like that, but a lot of it is important things that Cory has described and that could be recorded and written down. And then if you want to do more, of course, you know, there's much more to do, but you can order that on our website or through our office. You can get that information too. And maybe you'll give it a try. It was written by sisterhood members.
Okay.
So how powerful is Women's League? I mean, because Pat saw the advertisement for tonight and she shared this, and we've got resources amongst all of us. And the beauty of this thing is to share it. Even if you don't want to buy a book for each of your grandparents, from the little bit I've seen on the website, it's a wonderful place to start with questions, because you need to know the questions to ask. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, thank you. And Meryl Balaban has her hand up. Meryl, you need to unmute yourself.
I posted the question. I was wondering, they're advertising on Facebook all the time, these little thumb drives that sort out pictures and categorize them and everything. You know, I've been looking at them and wanting to get one, but I didn't know one from another. Have you seen them or tried them at all?
I have not used, I've seen advertisements. I have not used them at all. The one caution about thumb drives, which unfortunately I had personal experience with, is that a thumb drive will last not as long as you would like. it depends on how many times you open it and access it. The more you do, you know, it's not like it lasts 10 years. It's like it lasts for 4,000, I don't know what the number is, but 4,000 openings. So you have to be careful about thumb drives. There's lots more on preservation. And I'm hoping if there's a group who's interested, we can do one session just on preservation. I've only started to really look at the information on it because it's one area. I mean, I have my, I hate to say it, I have my archives upstairs in the attic, which gets heat in the winter, and you know, it's terrible. So I'm going to bring that stuff down. But you know, we live and learn, right?
Absolutely. Okay, Laura Friedel had her hand up before.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what you decide about family members when you're writing stories. Someone who is a disagreeable person who has done things that are hurtful. Do you write about that?
That's a really good question. I won't share. So every family's got people in it
Right.
that are not the most admirable. So what I do is I talk about their personality traits more than specifics. One of our family members is very narcissistic, and so we talk about that. I talk
Yeah.
about that. But I really want to emphasize as well the positive traits of them, because I've got kids and grandkids who've been named after them. What was it that was so good? But no, I've tried to be honest. My mother's father was, and it's interesting. Okay, my mother's father was not a wonderful father. My mother was the youngest of 6. The 5 older children never had a relationship with my father. They have a very different view of not my father, but my grandfather. They have a very different view of him than my mother, who found him the most loving parent she ever had. So it depends on who you are, where you are.
That's right.
You know, where you are in the ratings there. So
I think it's easier if the person has already died.
everybody except for Stan and I, and well, his sister had died by the time I started to write about it. Had died, and the stories is what I wanted to pass on. And I'm really hoping that my kids and grandkids will ask for stories from us. One of the sources I just found today was on journaling, which is really an important thing in this age of COVID, you know, this period of the pandemic. So thank you.
Okay, so there's another question. Southern New Jersey branch had a program many years ago. This is a comment where we needed to bring the name of the person we were named for. I know that I'm named for my great grandmother, and I know a lot about her. However, almost no one had that information. And the question was from Vilma, do you use ancestry.com or any of the other genealogical sites to look for additional family through DNA? Good
I
question.
do not. And I didn't go into it, but I was really interested in focusing on the ancestors that my kids were named for, because my whole journey started with, who am I named for, from David. And I'm not really interested in, or I haven't been interested in the 1,000 cousins that I have, or second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins out there. I think it's really interesting. You know, it depends on what your focus is. And that's why I said at the beginning, you need to decide on what focus you want to go on. But I really implore you, no matter what your focus is to work on making that stuff easily accessible. That's why I decided to do the box and the Dropbox and to do a book, because I wanted to make it easily accessible. As this friend of mine has this really fabulous program where you can put pictures and stories in the program, but she sat with me for a half hour, and I'm good on the computer, and there was no way I could have used that program. So, it's your choice. It's where you want to put the focus. All of you are different. All of your families are different. And what I'm just trying to do tonight is to share with you my journey and how I did it, and give you some idea of how other ways of possibly doing it for you. But it's your personal journey.
Okay, and Lynn raised her hand. Lynn, if you want to unmute yourself. Hey, Lynn. You're muted. You're muted.
Unmute,
Lynn, you're still
unmute.
muted. You're talking, but you're muted.
Oh.
Okay,
There
good.
you
I
go.
thought I unmuted myself,
How are you?
but good. And we had this program in Southern New Jersey, and you had to come with your Hebrew name and who you were named for. And I was amazed about how few people know. And I know a lot about the person I'm named for. I'm named for my great-grandmother. And the really weird thing is that some of the things I do are things she did.
Wow.
And sometimes that spooks me.
Yeah.
But she was the gefilte fish maker. I am the gefilte fish maker now that my mother's no longer around. She was the baker. I'm the baker. Her mother contributed to Solomon Schechter when they were in Romania. And so I do Torah fund stuff without realizing that my ancestors did that in a slightly different form, a slightly different time, but still the same format. And and one of the things on my list to do is to put together scrapbooks for my grandchildren about the people for whom they were named.
Oh, nice.
That's fabulous.
And I have some jewelry that will go to each of my granddaughters when they turn 16 that I got from the person for whom they're named. And I'm just very excited about that.
That's wonderful. I have to tell you, Lynn, that I don't know who I'm named after. I have no idea. No idea. My mother never told me. I know who my brothers are named after, but I don't know who I'm named after. You remember the picture of that pin that I don't know if you were able to read what the story was, that was a picture of my mother as a young girl. And I wear it every time that I go someplace and I want to take my mother with me. My granddaughter, Alice Naomi, is named after my mother. And that pin will go to Alice Naomi.
So it's, and I have candlesticks that came from my grandmother, but they apparently came from my great-grandmother and the person before her.
And where's the story about them? Where have you stored that story and how have you enhanced that story?
I have to do, that's one of the things on my list. And my son keeps saying, Mom, you have to write down these stories.
You do.
So,
You do.
and he's
We
right.
have a couple more questions. Marcia Topple, what do you do when your documents and letters are in a foreign language? I have letters from my grandparents from Poland dating back to the 1930s.
I'm not sure. My cousin uncovered a bunch of pictures, and there was one of two men in chains with Yiddish or something on the back. I don't know if it was Yiddish or Russian on the back. So I sent it to a friend of mine, and she was able to translate some of it. There may be some resources that you can go to, and that's again, as I started, I said that my journey was just intent and heart and interest, and not research. But I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to find research and see if we can find that. I am not an expert. I'm just somebody who did something because I wanted to transmit my family story to future generations.
Okay, and there's one last question in the chat. I was named, this is from Ira Schechter. I was named after my grandmother who died during the last pandemic. I have her marriage certificate, but that's all I know. I know no stories about her. My father was only 5 when she died. How can I get information?
Yeah. Any wider family members that might have had stories is where you go. That's a tough one because she died so young. Again, you can try something like ancestry.com and see if there's relatives out there, and that's a good reason to do that. See if there are relatives out there that you don't know of that might have known the story of her life. Other than that, I don't know.
Yeah. So Donna Frankel put in a lovely story, and I'm going to let Donna tell the story instead of me reading it from the chat. So Donna Frankel, can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, I've unmuted. I've been doing, I've been blessed with a mother who even in the 1950s started collecting family stories on all sides and gave me a fairly full 4 or 5 generation family tree, extended family tree. And then when I married, my husband has a cousin who did the same thing going back 9 generations. And she actually goes back to Poland and Russia and goes, and she's written a Yisker book and had it translated in 18 languages. I mean, I have a lot of resources that most people don't, but I also have some difficult people. I have an uncle who I call it whitewashing, when suddenly these poor immigrants who came from Russia, who we know had nothing. And my grandmother was orphaned and was apprenticed to a millinery place and had to make hats at the age of 16. Suddenly she's middle class, and he makes everything out to be better than it was. And then on my husband's side, we have this Dora Rachel, which just means Aunt Rachel, but she changed her name 5 times. So it's very hard to trace her and track her down. And family lore has her starting the 6-Day War in Israel because she went there at the right time and stole a ride on some army truck and ended up arguing with somebody in Egypt. And who knows? I mean, the stories just go on and on. But we know she's the eldest of my father's father, my husband's father's family. And yet she keeps shaving off years to the point now she's almost younger than her eldest child. So we have these people who like to embroider, and it's very, very hard to get to the truth. And I only want the truth. And so I have to go to 2 different relatives who don't know each other. And I say, what was the story of Grandma Lillian when she came at 14, lied about her age because you could not go on steerage by yourself from Russia unless you were 16. So we know to shave off 2 years there or whatever. And how did she end up in Ellis Island where her step half brother, who she didn't know, who was 40, was supposed to meet her at the ship and didn't show up? How did she really get to Lynn, Massachusetts at age 14 with a scrap of paper with his name and an address? So I have 4 different relatives who give me that story, and it's all different. Which one is true? I don't know. So I end up collecting all these stories, and I say, according to Aunt Sarah, according to this one, according to that one. And then how do you take all these stories and how do you make sense of them? Do you write a book? What do you do?
It depends on what your goals are. It really depends on what your goals are. Maybe you want to put all those stories into a chapter, not a book. But this was my grandmother, or this was my grandfather, and this is what this one told me, and this one told me, and this one told me, and this one told me. And the truth is yet to be known, but make your own conclusions. Make your own conclusion. Make
Cory,
sure that they're written down.
Cory, can
Yeah.
I say something on that one?
Sure.
You turn it around and you make it, and Cory was starting to get to this, if you make it about you and the effect on you to have these kinds of differing stories, what has that done? I mean, you can approach it in a way that's very humorous and say, this is my family, and these are the kinds of things I've seen in my family. So you're not making a judgment call on the kind of person the uncle is who whitewashed or anything else, but rather presenting the evidence and then saying, all right, here's what it was like to grow up in a family where whitewashing was very common. And it's all about you, but you're substantiating the way you're feeling by providing these information. So then it's okay to have 4 different versions. It's okay to have 8 different versions because you're centering it on you and it's the effect on you. And one more thing I wanted to say, I can't remember, was it Laura who asked about, dealing with the relative who's very, very difficult? with that, if you stay focused on facts only and leave the judgments out of it and leave it up to your readers or family members to draw their own conclusions, they'll get where you want them to go without your attributing, you know, like, oh, he was difficult or she was difficult and this and that. Sometimes it stops a reader if you come right out and say that, because they may not feel that way, or they may know the relative in a different way. So if you can just present facts and leave it up to your reader to kind of figure out what they have to, what conclusions they want to make, then it works. And you can say what you need to say, but just hold it back a little bit on how you actually feel. You can still do it through your word choice and so forth without being so judgmental.
That's very good advice. And my advice to everybody is get your stories as soon as possible. People are dying off and they forget, or they have Alzheimer's. Get those stories, put them down wherever you can put them down, and know that every family has stories, every family.
Right.
And they're worth it. It's worth it. And it's so joyful. Ellen, thank you so much. Ellen is going to be our resource for how to write the family stories. And if there's interest, we're going to be doing a session just on that.
Okay, Elaine Friedman has her hand raised. So Elaine Friedman, if you can unmute, please.
Hi, I just have something to kind of piggyback on that. I got interested in this because with the pandemic, I was looking for something to do. And I live in a community of 120 condos, and I started a newsletter. And one of the things that I did was interview a different neighbor each month. And I've done 7 months so far. And last month they interviewed me. And that started it with my family, because I sent it to my children and my grandchildren, and they've all been hounding me now. You have to write down more about yourself. And so that's why I got so interested. But I did something else. If you want to look into the future, when my children were about the age of graduating college, I had saved everything from the time they were little. A tooth that fell out, a note to the tooth fairy, a lock of hair at their first haircut, report cards, pictures, and so forth. And I presented each of them one Hanukkah with a book of their life up until then. And then I did it, I have just granddaughters. I did it for 4 of them on their 16th birthday. They got a scrapbook. One had to wait till 23 because I was slowing down. But they have those scrapbooks. And when I meet their friends say to me, oh, I saw Andy's scrapbook. I love the part, you know, and they will have that to show to their children. So if going to the ancestors is too much for you, start now with the present, and then you can pass that on. And I just wanted to say that.
Elaine, that's wonderful. I have to tell you that the more I get involved with this and talk to people about it, the more I see how everybody's doing it in their way. And that's why really one of the main goals that I have for this whole personal archives section of Women's League Archives is to give a venue for people to share how they do things. I mean, I do an adventure book for each grandchild. Jacob's Adventures with Bubby and Zadie, okay? So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do it. And if we can share those ways, that may help to stimulate and motivate us to do something, because now is the time. Because tomorrow we never know what's going to happen. Carol?
Okay. Cory, there are not any more questions. However, if everybody looks in the chat, there have been some suggestions that Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty Foundation has searchable archives. The International Jewish Geology Society has an amazing week-long conference. Thank you, Fran Hildebrandt, every summer. And they alternate locations, and participants can choose to attend the entire thing. And Julia Loeb, you want to mention what you put in the chat, please?
I was just going to say, if it seems overwhelming, if you have all the stories up here and you think, oh, I need to write them down, just record them. Just, every day take 5 minutes or whatever and record a story, and then you can transcribe it, or someone can transcribe it, or you can keep it so the person can hear your voice. But they did that whole StoryCorps Thanksgiving thing a couple of years ago, where you were supposed to interview family members and have them archived at the Library of Congress. So, I mean, the recordings, and then you have the issues about the technology and the whatever media you're recording it on can degrade, and you have to be able to play it and all that. But just if it feels overwhelming because there's so much, just start a little bit every day. Take your phone and tell a story instead of writing it down, because no one can get it from you if you're not around and it's in your head. But if it's on a recording, someone else can transcribe it too.
So you don't even need that. Thank you, Julia. What you can do, most of our smartphones have a dictation. You can dictate a text, you can dictate an email. So what you might want to do is just dictate, have the dictation on your phone, and the voice where it prints it, and just tell your story in the body of an email, and then send it to yourself and edit it once you get it. And then it's an easy way to do it. Texts are the same way, and then you have to copy it and paste it. So what we'll do is in the chat, I'll see if we can take some of these great ideas and put them in some kind of a document. You will, as I said before, be getting a Google form survey. And in that survey will be a question, do you want the resource sheet? If you do, then, because I'm not going to send it if you don't want it, but if you do, then I will send it to you, and I will also send the ideas from the chat. I'll get the chat. As well as the link for the copy of the recording of this session. I want to thank Carol and Karen Bellina, Carol Simon and Carol Bellina, for really facilitating and helping me with both the questions and with the technology. And hopefully, if you're interested, we'll see you on April 20th. Until then, don't hesitate to call on us for help and to share what and how you are doing. Please complete the survey. And I have one more question for you. Tonight, I have told you about my journey to tell my story. How will you tell yours? Thank you for coming.